Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back, way back, to a time when the wind didn't just mess up your hair but could strip the flesh off your bones. Picture this. The red-orange horizon is thick with dust. The sun's gone from blinding to ghostly, and the air tastes like dry copper. You're standing in the middle of a rocky plain somewhere in ancient Persia, the Zagros Mountains looming behind you like tired old giants. And the storm, oh, the storm, is coming. A wall of grit and fury, taller than any palace, roaring like the gods themselves are grinding teeth. You can't outrun it. You probably won't survive this, but we're going to try anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a remote village or a city that never sleeps, post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this little bedtime journey can reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're alone at first. The rest of the caravan has disappeared behind a veil of moving sand, and your eyes sting just looking ahead. You squint. What direction were you even going? North? East? The dunes don't help. They look like sleepy hills now, but when the wind rises, they'll dance and change shape like mischief-loving spirits. You pull your headscarf tighter, grateful for the lesson you remembered just in time. Never travel in Persia without cloth to cover your face. Ancient Persians understood the art of wrapping, not just to look regal, though yes, it looked regal, but for protection. A turban wasn't just fashion, it was survival gear. Thick, long strips of linen or wool wrapped again and again could filter dust, shield sunburns, even be soaked with water to cool you down. Historians still argue whether the earliest Persian headgear designs were borrowed from desert-dwelling nomads or developed locally in response to the region's unforgiving geography. But your scarf? It's a half-ripped shirt. You tie it around your nose and mouth anyway. There's no time for regrets. The wind picks up again. Not fast yet, but urgent, like it's warning you to move. You take one cautious step, your sandal slipping a little on loose gravel. Another step. Still no sign of the camel. Your camel. The one with the supplies. Hopefully he's not smarter than you and already found shelter. Your eyes water. It's not from emotion, though panic is tapping at the back of your brain like an annoying neighbor. It's from the sand. So fine it makes Flower jealous. You blink fast, wishing you had one of those thin bronze veils Persian riders used, with their little slits for vision. Instead, you're blinking like someone just turned on a leaf blower in your face. And the smell, that dry mineral smell, like the earth itself is exhaling. There's a subtle tang of old fire, as if the desert remembers every battle it ever watched. The Achaemenid Empire, home to Darius, Xerxes, and more golden robes than a royal wedding, once ruled this land. But even their armies, with their neat lines and polished armor, feared sandstorms. One historian claims Persian generals avoided crossing open plains in midsummer for this exact reason. Another counters that sandstorms were strategically used. Hide an ambush, blind the enemy, let nature do the fighting. Truth? Somewhere in the middle, as always. A sudden gust hits your side like a slap. You stagger, one foot dipping into a shallow depression. Sand flares up around you, whirling, grating against your skin. You duck your head and wrap your arms around yourself. The wind is no longer a whisper. It's a voice, ancient and full of fury. It howls across the plain, like it's looking for something it lost. Your ears fill with it. You try to listen for familiar sounds, bells from the camels, a shout from a fellow traveler, but the wind eats all noise. You could scream and no one would hear. The air is thicker now. Breathing feels like inhaling a bowl of dust. You cough. Sand clings to your teeth. You taste ancient pottery and broken dreams. And somewhere in your mind, the thought arrives. This is how people vanish. Just vanish. You lower yourself to your knees, steadying yourself. One hand reaches out blindly, something solid. A low rock outcrop, sharp-edged and sun-warmed. You crouch beside it, grateful for even this pathetic excuse for a windbreak. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. And as you crouch, the storm approaches. The sky darkens with more than dust now. A true wall of sand, high as a fortress, wide as your fear. You squint at its edge, hypnotized by the roiling motion. It looks alive. Here's a strange little tidbit. Some Persian desert dwellers believed storms had moods, spirits riding in the wind, angry or amused, depending on the day. Offerings were left in little piles of stones, prayers whispered to Ahura Mazda for mercy. And now, crouched in your rock crevice with sand trickling into your ears, you briefly consider whispering one yourself. But you don't. You just cling tighter. The first real wave hits like a freight wagon. You can't see. You can't hear. All you can do is curl up, wait it out, and hope that what you're sheltering behind isn't the den of some slithering creature enjoying the same brilliant idea. 1 deep breath. 2. The sand grates against your cheekbone. Welcome to ancient Persia. Hope you packed extra socks. Your world is the color of cinnamon now. You press your face tighter to your arm, the make-do scarf barely holding back the sting of the airborne grit. It's everywhere, under your eyelids, in your nostrils, behind your ears. Every shallow breath is a gamble. Somewhere between wheezing and blinking furiously, you remember that weird passage in Herodotus, where he described Persian soldiers crossing vast deserts with nothing but cloths soaked in vinegar to sweeten the air. Historians still argue whether that was a medical trick, a poetic exaggeration, or just another moment where he made things up entirely. Either way, you could really go for a vinegar-soaked rag right now. The rock shelter you've found is doing its best, but the storm is gaining. The wind whistles through every gap, slipping around your makeshift mask like a gossip with bad intentions. You feel like your skin is being exfoliated by 1,000 tiny, angry hands. And just when you think you can't possibly be more uncomfortable, a grain of sand makes it into your eye. The right one. Of course it's the right one. You curse quietly. PG-13, don't worry. And blink rapidly, trying to tear it out. For a moment, you consider taking off the scarf to rub it properly. Then you imagine inhaling a full lungful of dry, silty air and change your mind. You blink some more. It doesn't help. Crawling along the base of the rock, you fumble with your robes until you find a hem still marginally clean. Carefully, you dab your eye, pushing through the sting. The storm doesn't care. It roars louder, the pitch higher now, almost like laughter. You finally pull the cloth away. Blurry vision is still vision, right? You spot movement, a ripple in the curtain of dust. Something large. No, someone. Or at least something wearing enough fabric to be mistaken for a moving tent. Your camel? Please let it be your camel. You push yourself up and stagger toward it. The wind slaps you sideways, but your legs are locked in survival mode now. Each step is a negotiation. Lift, shift, slide, brace, lift, shift, slide, brace. It's like walking on an invisible treadmill with a vendetta. You raise your arm in greeting, or distress. At this point, you're not sure there's a difference. The figure comes closer, and you realize, yes, it's your camel. And he's judging you. With a face that says, I told you to follow me, your one-humped companion seems almost annoyed that you're still here. His lead rope dangles loosely, caked in dust, and one of your water skins is swinging like a pendulum. You reach for the rope, coughing a little as you cling to it. The camel doesn't bolt. He just exhales in a way that sounds like he's complaining about your life choices. And then, blessedly, you remember. You packed cloth. Real cloth. The thick woven stuff your cousin in Susa insisted on bringing. You fumble through the saddlebag with gritty fingers and find it. A long, dusty, but gloriously intact strip of linen. You wrap it tightly across your face, looping it again and again until only your eyes show. You make a turbanish knot on top. Ugly, but functional. It's like armor. Your breathing steadies, your vision sharpens just enough, and you almost feel human again. Ancient Persians were serious about head coverings. Nobles wore intricate ones. Soldiers kept them snug and close. Some historians say Achaemenid troops had layers of protective cloth against both the sun and wind, while others argue it was mostly about status and style. But standing here now, camel leash in one hand and newfound headgear cutting the wind's bite, you're not thinking about fashion. You're thinking, this is survivable. Almost. The camel starts walking, which is camel for follow me if you want to live. You don't argue. You clutch the lead rope and let him guide you, leaning into the wind. The sandstorm hasn't peaked yet, but it's close. You can feel it pressing in tighter, its particles finer, its howling angrier. You remember a story an old man told you once. Something about how, if you heard voices in the storm, it was the dead whispering. Just hallucinations, probably. But the wind really does sound like murmuring now. Distant, incoherent, and just weird enough to make your spine twitch. You squint ahead, vision flickering in and out as gusts pass. There, something darker on the horizon. Shapes, low, square, not natural. A structure, maybe an old watchtower, or ruins. You pull gently on the camel's reins. He resists, naturally, but you insist. He grumbles, as always, then turns. Closer. The forms resolve into mud brick walls, crumbling and uneven, some half buried by time and neglect. Shelter. Shelter with corners. You could cry. You hurry forward, stumbling through knee-deep drifts. The camel snorts, then follows, clearly skeptical of your architectural taste. You reach the edge of the structure and duck into what might have once been a storehouse. 3 walls still stand. The 4th is mostly collapsed, but its debris forms a partial windbreak. You kneel in the corner and pull the camel in after you. He fits, barely, nose to wall, grumbling. You both settle into the tight space, curled up like mismatched beans in a dusty pod. Here, with some of the storm blocked, your thoughts slow. You notice details. Ancient carvings on the crumbling bricks. Faint cuneiform, perhaps. A niche in the wall, maybe once used for oil lamps. And scrawled near the entrance, faded but unmistakable, a crude drawing of a man with a very large hat. You allow yourself a small laugh. Maybe someone else survived a storm here too. Maybe they even did it with style. And now, so do you. The storm keeps howling, but now it's doing it somewhere just outside your skull instead of directly inside it. That's an improvement. The mud brick shelter is holding, barely, and the camel has accepted his fate by slumping to the floor like a giant sighing beanbag. You huddle beside him, grateful for the heat radiating off his flank, even if he smells like sun-cooked hay and bad decisions. You're exhausted. Every muscle is coated in tension. And you know what? You deserve a little credit. Not everyone dragged themselves through a Persian sandstorm with only half a scarf and a bad sense of direction. But rest isn't really an option. The storm may not care about your plans, but the caravan certainly will. Somewhere out there, maybe a mile, maybe 10, the rest of the group is either riding this out in their own hidey holes or pressing on because, well, ancient trade waits for no one. You gather your gear, check the camels' packs, and debate whether to move. The wind has shifted. It's not gone, but it's lost some of its bite. Time to press forward. You nudge your companion gently. He blinks once, deeply unimpressed, then rises with the energy of a man forced out of bed at 4 a.m. to go jogging. Outside, the air still churns, but the visibility has improved. Barely. Just enough to see your own hand and maybe the next dune. Not ideal, but better than being blind. You tie the scarf tighter around your face and step forward, leading the camel into the wind again. There's no real path, of course. The desert eats paths for breakfast. But you think you are heading toward the northeast edge of the Dashti Kavir, Persia's great salt desert. The caravan was supposed to skirt its edge, picking up goods near the oasis town of Kashan before crossing toward the central trade hub of Ray. At least, that's what the map said. If only it came with tiny arrows labeled, "Don't go this way." Trade caravans in the Achaemenid era weren't just wandering mobs of camels. These were logistical marvels. Standardized routes, relay stations, royal road systems spanning hundreds of miles. Some historians still marvel at how efficient the Persians were. Others suggest much of the efficiency came from exaggerated royal records, more PR than reality. Still, someone had to carry all that saffron and lapis lazuli without Google Maps. The camel stumbles briefly, tugging the reins from your hand. He recovers, grunts in protest, and continues. You follow, shielding your eyes with one hand. The light is dim but growing, storm-filtered sun beginning to pierce through. You trudge over a slope, boots slipping in loose sand, and finally catch sight of something that doesn't look like dust, movement, tiny silhouettes in the haze. The caravan. You wave both arms, hoping it's not a mirage. One of the figures stops, turns, raises a hand. Yes, it's them. You start downhill, adrenaline giving your legs new life. The camel follows with his usual reluctance. The figures grow larger. 3 riders, 2 more camels, and, joy of joys, a cart of supplies that did not blow away in the chaos. You're greeted with a mix of concern and sarcasm. One man offers water, another claps you on the back and says, "Only 2 kinds of people survive storms like that, the lucky and the fools." You tell him you're both. The caravan continues moving. There's no rest stop here, no dramatic rescue scene. You're simply folded back into the dusty procession like a paperclip that fell off someone's desk. And yet, there's comfort in that. You're not alone anymore. The leader, a grizzled woman with one eye and more rings than fingers, motions you closer. "Next stop," she grunts, "a dry patch with shelter and firewood. If the storm doesn't get bored and come back." You nod. You'd prefer not to meet the storm again. The group moves slowly now. The sand has settled into uneven drifts, hiding rocks and holes like some bored god tried to booby-trap the trail. You fall into rhythm behind the others, watching the backs of swaying camels, the occasional sparkle of metal on a saddle. And then you notice it. Faint markings on the ground, carved deep into a stone slab half buried by sand. You signal the caravan to stop and brush the stone clear. A symbol, a spiral sun over a long road. An old wayfinding sign. You've heard stories, ancient merchants and travelers carving simple maps, star markers, or clan emblems into stones along key routes. Historians still argue whether these markers were common navigational tools or just the ancient equivalent of Kilroy was here. Either way, it's enough to reassure the leader. She nods once and urges the group forward. You continue in silence for a while, lulled by the rhythm of hooves and feet and creaking leather straps. The wind's still present, but it's more muttering now, like it's sulking after not managing to bury you alive. One man hums a tune under his breath. Another munches on something that smells suspiciously like dried dates and goat fat. Your own stomach growls, but you save your rations for later. As you walk, your eyes flick across the landscape. You start to notice patterns, the faint white glimmer of ancient salt deposits, the weird way some dunes slope sharply only on one side, almost like nature's been combing the land with a giant rake. And then you remember something from an old scroll. Travelers were taught to read the direction of sand ripples to tell wind patterns and locate possible shelter. You examine the dunes again. Yes, some of the ridges point toward a low rise ahead. If there's shelter, it'll be there. You point it out to the leader. She squints, nods slowly. Sharp eyes, she mutters. Stay alive and we'll make a desert man of you yet. Praise. Maybe. You'll take it. You march onward, the group narrowing into a line as you crest the next dune. Beyond it, a gully. Natural rock shelves, scattered scrub, and, most importantly, cover from the wind. As you descend into it, you allow yourself a tiny smile. You're still in this, still walking, still breathing. And for now, that's enough. The gully cradles you like a long-forgotten riverbed. Steep walls of packed clay and wind-scoured stone rise on either side, tall enough to muffle the wind into a dull background hiss. It's not silence, but it's close. And in this desert, close is luxury. You tether your camel to a scrubby bush, really just a stick with ambition, and collapse against a sun-warmed rock. Your fingers ache. Your face feels like it's been sandpapered, but you're alive. Not bad, considering. The others spread out in the gully, staking out space like cats claiming sunbeams. One man starts unpacking dry kindling from an oilskin sack, miraculously unsinged. Someone else digs out firestones and starts tapping with more confidence than accuracy. You hear the occasional muttered curse, followed by the smell of hope, smoke. Meanwhile, your eyes drift to the walls around you, layered and pocked, each striation a century of wind and weather. These cliffs weren't just carved by time, they were written on by it, faint lines, scratch marks, even a few fingerprints preserved in the baked mud, likely from builders or wanderers long gone. You run your fingers over them, wondering if those hands belong to soldiers, traders, or just someone like you, trying to stay alive until sunset. Ancient Persia was full of these hidden places, ruins, shelters, forgotten storehouses tucked into hills and gullies. The Achaemenids, known for their grandeur, also mastered the art of subtle survival. They built outposts disguised as ruins, supply caches in riverbeds, and way stations you could miss even if you were sitting on one. Some say Cyrus the Great designed an entire spy network that moved through these back channels, hidden from both friend and foe. Others claim those are later legends, retrofitted to make the empire sound more omniscient than it really was. Either way, this gully has the same aura, half-buried secrets and half-remembered stories. A breeze stirs, not a howl, not a threat, just air moving gently across the stones. You tilt your head and let it wash over you. It carries the scent of dust, clay, and something else. Something faintly sweet. You look around. At first, you see nothing. Then, tucked between two stones, you spot it. A flowering bush, tiny purple blossoms, stubbornly blooming despite the arid cruelty. A wild Persian lilac, maybe. You vaguely remember hearing that they're used in oils, even perfumes. You pluck one bloom gently and tuck it behind your ear. Survival in style? Why not? Across the gully, someone calls out, a woman with a sharp voice and sharper cheekbones. She's found something in the rock wall, a door frame, or what's left of it, sunken wood and stone, the outline of an entrance, half filled with debris. You wander over with a few others. The leader crouches down, clears some of the rubble, and reveals a narrow passage leading into darkness. Cool air drifts out. Instantly, 3 things register: shade, potential danger, and the unmistakable smell of something ancient. You exchange glances. No one speaks it aloud, but you all know what's coming. You go in first. Because of course you do. The passage is low. You duck. The floor shifts underfoot. Dry sand giving way to stone tiles, most cracked but still holding. You run your hand along the wall, cool, smooth, deliberately shaped. This was once a room, a chamber. Maybe storage, maybe shelter, maybe something more. You step deeper, the light fading behind you. You hear someone mutter something behind you. Don't wake anything. And you chuckle softly. Not because it's funny, but because if you don't laugh, your brain might start asking questions you don't want answered in a pitch-black ruin. A few more steps, and your foot bumps something. You freeze. Then you look down. Not bones, not a curse tablet, just a pot. Clay, intact, covered in dust. You kneel and brush it off. Geometric patterns, faded but clear. Definitely Persian, maybe early Achaemenid. This room was once used, maintained. You hold your breath and lift the lid. Inside, nothing but sand. Still, you found something. Proof you're not the first wanderer to hide here. Maybe not the first to survive either. Someone behind you lights a small lamp. The flickering light reveals more pottery. Carved shelves, scorch marks on the ceiling, old fires. Not just a chamber, a shelter, a refuge built into the stone. You all exhale at once. Looks stable, the leader says, tapping the walls. Could use this tonight if the wind returns. You nod. You step outside and squint into the light. The storm has faded to a dusty memory now, settling over the land like a worn blanket. As the caravan settles in, you realize this is what survival in ancient Persia looked like. Not grand temples or epic battles, but these quiet victories, finding ruins, making shelter, sharing heat, brewing tea in forgotten places. Your stomach growls. Which brings you to the second challenge of the day, food. You rummage through your pack, dried apricots, flatbread, a tiny pouch of spiced goat cheese wrapped in waxed leaves. Not exactly a royal feast, but in this moment, it's a banquet. You sit on a flat rock, your back to the sun-warmed stone, and unwrap the meal. The apricots are chewy, tangy, and somehow fresher than you remember. The cheese crumbles like it holds a grudge. You smear some on the bread and take a slow bite. Bliss. Persian cuisine, even in its barest travel form, had elegance. Travelers carried dried fruit, honeyed nuts, preserved meat laced with coriander. Some even had portable spice mixes to liven up the blandest bread. There's even a fringe theory that Persian royals insisted their messengers carry a pinch of saffron at all times, either to flavor tea or bribe their way through provincial borders. You raise a chunk of cheese bread in a silent toast. To the past, to this place, to the fools who thought the desert couldn't be home, and to you, for surviving long enough to taste it. You wake to the sound of the wind whispering again. Less of a threat now, more like the desert muttering in its sleep. Your back aches, your mouth is dry, and something gritty is definitely stuck in your ear. Good morning. The gully is still shadowed by the canyon walls, the sun only beginning to slide across the rim in golden slivers. You stretch, joints popping like old wood, and glance around. Most of the caravan is still half asleep, or pretending to be. A few people have already stoked a small fire. There's that wonderful crackle, the occasional clink of cookware, and the earthy aroma of something cooking. Hopefully not camel. You dig through your pack and pull out your water skin. It sloshes with all the joy of a soon-to-be empty container. You hesitate. Just a sip then. The water hits your mouth like a cool prayer. Sharp, clean, almost metallic. This batch probably came from a qanat system. Ingenious things, really. The Persians mastered them over 2,500 years ago. Underground canals designed to channel water from mountain aquifers to lowland fields and cities. No pumps, no pipes, just gravity, slope, and brilliance. Some of those ancient qanats are still in use today. Others, buried under sand and time. Historians agree that without qanats, the Achaemenid Empire would have crumbled long before Alexander came knocking. What they don't agree on is whether the system spread from Persia outward or arrived through earlier Mesopotamian influence. Either way, you silently thank the long-dead engineer who decided digging a 50-kilometer tunnel under a mountain sounded like fun. You tuck the water skin away and rise to your feet, bones creaking like an old cart. The camel eyes you with suspicion. He's probably calculating whether to cooperate or roll dramatically onto his side in protest. You win the standoff with a bribe, half a dried date. He chews it like it owes him money. Soon, the caravan begins repacking. The leader gives orders in that blunt voice of hers, more bark than bite. You're to move at a slow pace today. There's still dust in the air, and the wind might whip back around. Nobody's eager to meet yesterday's storm's angrier cousin. You hoist your pack onto the camel's saddle and double-check your gear. One robe torn, one scarf still functional, and your last chunk of flatbread now shaped like a map of Anatolia. Close enough. Before you leave the gully, you take one last look at the ruined shelter. There's something about it. Its simplicity. Its silence. You imagine the people who built it centuries ago. Did they survive? Were they running from something? Did they share tea in the same spot you did? You carve a small mark into the stone near the entrance. Nothing fancy, just a line and a dot. Your version of, I was here. Maybe someone will find it one day. Maybe they'll wonder about you too. Back on the trail, the landscape has changed. The storm has scoured the dunes into unfamiliar shapes. Flat plains have become jagged ridges. What was once a trail is now a guessing game. The leader signals to one of the older men, your guide for today. His beard could house a family of desert mice, and his robes smell like cumin and campfire. He grunts a greeting and immediately starts walking. You follow. At first it's chaos. Your boots sink into soft patches. The camel steps on a rock, stumbles, glares at you like it's your fault. You mutter an apology. He does not accept. But the guide? He walks like the desert is an old friend. He watches the sky, the direction of the sand ripples, the angle of rock shadows. You watch him closely, trying to pick up the cues. How he licks his finger and holds it to the wind. How he taps his walking stick twice before changing direction. See that? He mutters, pointing to a ridge with a strange curve. Means the wind's curling southeast. Storm's probably retreating that way. You nod. You pretend you knew that. He grunts approvingly. He points again, this time at a scattering of white across the sand. Salt crust, he says. Old lake bed. Walk on it, and you'll burn your feet by noon. Better we loop wide. You hadn't noticed. But now that he says it, you see the glimmer, like the land's been dusted with broken glass. Beautiful. Deadly. Salt was both blessing and curse in ancient Persia, essential for preservation, trade, even medicine, but lethal when it crept into the soil. Some ancient texts speak of entire fields going silent when the salt lines rose too high. Others claimed it was a punishment from angry gods. Historians still argue whether the salinization of certain regions was caused by over-irrigation, climate shift, or just poor drainage planning. As you walk the loop around the salt flat, your eyes catch movement on the horizon. Birds, dozens of them, circling in slow spirals. You point them out. The guide nods. Probably a shallow well, he says. Or a dead goat. Charming. But he veers in their direction anyway. After an hour, you arrive at a dip in the land where the sand gives way to pebbles and dry brush. Tucked between two large stones is a shallow pool, barely a puddle, but still water, and beside it, a clay jar half buried in the dirt. Ancient, cracked, empty, but shaped with purpose. You kneel beside it, fingers brushing its side. Who left this? A traveler like you? A merchant? A soldier? Maybe a potter, testing his luck. The guide shrugs. We leave it. Always leave one empty, just in case. A caravan tradition, perhaps. A superstition. A kindness. Doesn't matter. You nod. You refill one of your water skins from the pool, straining it through cloth to catch any guests. Then you rise and look back. The sky is clearer now, the wind quiet, and for the first time in days, you feel almost safe. Almost. The camel farts, loudly. You're not sure what part of your ancient Persian survival training included this moment, but here it is, echoing across the desert like a deflated war horn. You look at the guide. He doesn't flinch, probably used to it. The camel, meanwhile, stares at you like you're the one who embarrassed him. You shake your head and keep walking. To be fair, the camel's been putting in the work. Despite his mood swings and gastrointestinal commentary, he's hauled you and your gear across sand, salt, rubble, and wind. And unlike you, he hasn't once fallen into a hole, cried into his scarf, or tried to argue with a rock. Camels, specifically the one-humped dromedaries, were indispensable to Persian desert travel. Ancient texts describe them as ships of the desert, which sounds poetic until you realize they also spit, grumble, and occasionally bite. Still, their ability to go for days without water, their broad feet made for soft sand, and their internal water conservation systems made them far more practical than horses in this brutal terrain. Some Persians believed camels could sense sandstorms before humans could. Others swore they remembered routes across the desert after only one trip, which may be a stretch. Your own camel seems to remember mostly grudges. You pat his flank anyway. He sneezes. The trail ahead narrows into a shallow ravine. Rock walls rise up like tired bookends, casting deep shadows that feel oddly comforting. You duck your head under a low ledge, the temperature dropping noticeably. The guide slows and raises a hand. You pause. He points. A snake. Coiled. Still. Watching. You freeze. The guide crouches, picks up a handful of pebbles, and tosses them gently in the snake's direction. It flicks its tongue, uncoils like spilled rope, and slithers away into the rocks. You exhale a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Desert viper, the guide mutters. Pretty, not polite. You nod very, very slowly. Snakes weren't unusual in ancient Persia. In fact, some were revered. The Avestan texts, central to Zoroastrianism, include both good and evil serpentine figures, cosmic representations of life, chaos, and rebirth. Scholars still debate whether Persians saw real snakes as sacred symbols or just something to avoid stepping on. Based on today's experience, you vote for the latter. Back on the trail, the ravine gives way to another open plain. A shimmer dances on the horizon. Heat or hope, it's hard to tell. The camel lumbers along, his ears twitching at invisible annoyances. You tug gently on his reins, guiding him away from a patch of suspiciously soft sand. You've already fallen into 2 sinkholes on this journey. You're not aiming for a third. As you crest a low rise, you spot movement. Fluttering cloth, a flash of color. Another caravan? You squint, adjusting the scarf across your eyes. Number. It's a lone rider, cloaked, slow-moving, headed in the opposite direction. The guide raises an eyebrow. You both step aside as the rider nears. He's older than the hills, or at least dressed like them. Layers of sun-faded robes, a face like folded parchment, and eyes sharp as obsidian. His donkey looks slightly more alive than a sack of flour, but the man rides tall, proud, like he's got secrets you'll never be cool enough to know. You exchange nods. Storm treat you well? He croaks. Didn't die, you say. He smiles. Then it was merciful. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a small bundle, dried figs wrapped in date leaves, and tosses it to you. You fumble the catch, almost drop it, recover with the grace of a collapsing tent. Eat those before the next wind, he says. They remember sunlight. Before you can ask what that means, he's already riding away. You unwrap the bundle. The figs are wrinkled, rich, and absurdly sweet. Your teeth sink into one and suddenly your entire mouth is alive again. Moisture, flavor, joy. You pass one to the guide, who nods approvingly. He's a wind watcher, the guide says. Old trader class, used to sit on hills and chart the storms. You believe in that? The guide shrugs. I believe in figs. The rest is details. You walk in silence for a while after that, chewing thoughtfully, occasionally swatting flies. By mid-afternoon, the sun hangs directly above like an indifferent god. The heat is thick, pressing down with all the subtlety of a jealous elephant. Your scarf is damp with sweat. The camel is wheezing softly. And then, salvation. A low patch of shade beneath a rocky overhang. Not much, but enough. You all huddle beneath it. Packs set down, cloaks stretched across sticks to widen the shadow. The heat eases just enough to think. You pour a tiny bit of water into your palm and rub it behind your ears. It evaporates instantly. And then, because why not, you talk to the camel. You know, you say, if we survive this, I might name you. He doesn't respond, thinking something noble, like Bahram, or sandbag, still nothing. You lean back against the rock, eyelids drooping. The guide stirs the coals of a small fire, and the smell of something nutty and sweet drifts over. Roasted chickpeas. Someone else adds a pinch of cumin. Another folds thin bread and wedges it between 2 flat stones to toast. The simplicity of it all makes you pause. Just people, heat, wind, and food. You almost feel timeless, like this moment could be 1,000 years ago or tomorrow. It reminds you of a tale you once heard, about a Persian king who disguised himself as a common traveler for a month each year, just to walk the roads, feel the hunger, hear the gossip. Historians still debate which king did it. Some say Darius, others claim it was just a legend. But you like the idea. Sometimes survival means stripping everything away until what's left is real. Bread, dust, camels, and the people beside you. You fall asleep like that, leaned against warm rock, with chickpea crumbs on your shirt and sunburn on your soul. You wake up to someone gently nudging your foot with a stick. Still alive? The guide asks, not bothering to disguise his amusement. You blink, momentarily unsure where you are. The shaded outcrop, the chickpea crumbs, the sound of someone softly snoring. Oh, right. Ancient Persia, sandstorms, camels, the usual. You push yourself upright and stretch, every bone in your back making a noise like it's been left out in the sun too long. Your camel is chewing on something that appears to be neither plant nor food, but seems to satisfy him anyway. Time to move, the guide says. The sun's dipped lower now, the shadows lengthening, the heat less punishing. Late afternoon, just enough daylight left to cover some ground before dusk. You rewrap your scarf, tighten your sandals, and fall into step beside your still disgruntled animal. This next stretch is quieter. The wind has finally lost interest in being dramatic and now hums gently along the dunes like it's bored and half asleep. But with less wind comes another challenge: disorientation. The desert, without its shifting noise and fury, is eerily still. The dunes curve softly, ridges stretch endlessly, and the sky is a wash of pale blue slowly bleeding into orange. Every direction looks the same. You start to wonder, are you walking in circles? The guide doesn't seem worried. He pauses, stares at the sky, then turns his attention to the ground. The stars'll help, he says, but until then, we watch the sand. You frown. The sand? He nods. See those ripples? You crouch beside him and squint. The sand is ridged like a frozen ocean, fine lines etched by wind. Some run parallel, others swirl in curves that almost look deliberate. Wind leaves marks, he says. We read them backwards. Apparently, in lieu of signposts, desert travelers learned to read the terrain like parchment. Ripples indicated wind direction. Tiny animal tracks suggested oases or shade. Even how your footprints collapsed behind you told a story. Whether the sand was shifting fast or steady, you stare a bit longer. Still looks like sand to you. But then, you notice it. The ripples in one direction are sharper, narrower. The wind here blew harder. That means, if the storm moved northeast and your shadows are falling to the west, you're heading southeast. You blink. You're learning. And you're not the only one reading the land. The guide pulls out a chipped piece of bronze, flat, with a small notch. An old navigation tool? He holds it up, lining it with the horizon, then pockets it again. Historians still argue whether such instruments were common or elite only. Some say Persian engineers crafted early gnomons and sundials for desert navigation. Others claim most desert navigation came from oral tradition, passed down through tribes. Watch the stars, follow the herds, trust your elders, and always avoid the place where the rocks hum. You don't hear any humming, so that's a relief. As you continue walking, the sun dips lower, the desert taking on that magical golden glow, the kind you'd pay good money to photograph if cameras existed. Shadows stretch and dance across the dunes. Your camel, apparently inspired by the lighting, decides this is the moment to stop and relieve himself, right in front of you. You sigh, deeply. You're doing great, you mutter with all the sarcasm you can muster. He flicks his tail in response. Soon you reach a high ridge. The guide climbs it first, motions for you to follow. At the top, the view is breathtaking. The desert unfurls below like a sleeping lion, vast, rippling, golden. But more importantly, you see what lies beyond the next rise, low stone structures. Another caravan stop, a shelter, maybe even a small trading post. The guide smiles. That's ours tonight. You exhale in relief, but something inside you also tightens, because distances in the desert lie. That cozy-looking cluster of stones, at least another 2 hours away. Still, you walk, because that's all there is to do. As the sun kisses the horizon, the sky bursts into color. Pinks, oranges, indigo creeping in at the edges. Stars begin to blink awake overhead. You watch the constellations emerge, one by one. The Big Dipper, familiar. The rest? Not so much, but the guide points. See that triangle? He asks. Orion's neighbor, we use that one, always points west in this season. You squint. It sort of looks like a triangle. Maybe. Ancient Persian astronomers mapped the heavens with remarkable accuracy. They used stars for planting, for trade, for war. Some texts describe the heavens as a divine map, others as a clock the gods wound up and forgot about. The debate continues. Were these maps sacred tools or early science? Either way, tonight, they're your GPS. With the stars guiding and the wind finally still, you trudge toward your goal. It's almost dark when you reach it. The buildings are older than old, stone slabs stacked without mortar, wind-worn and covered in etchings. You run your hand over one, a lion chasing a bull, a Zoroastrian motif maybe, or just someone's attempt at a warning. Inside, the air is cool and musty. Dust dances in your lamplight. There are broken pots, a pile of ash in what might have once been a hearth, and a low shelf carved directly into the wall. You unpack your things, spread your worn blanket across the flattest bit of floor you can find, and sit down heavily. Your legs throb, your lips crack when you smile, but you smile anyway. You survived another day. You read sand. You followed stars. And for the first time in this whole journey, the silence feels like a gift. You lay back. Outside, the stars glitter like tiny, ancient promises. Inside, your camel chews noisily and farts again. Some things, it seems, never change. At some point in the night, someone starts boiling water. The soft clink of iron, the low whoosh of flame, the gentle bubbling, it all drifts through your half-dream like a lullaby you forgot you knew. You don't open your eyes right away. Why would you? You're warm, mostly horizontal, and nothing seems to be on fire, except perhaps your back, thanks to the stone floor. But then, a scent hits your nose. Earthy, bright, familiar. Saffron. You sit up slowly, joints creaking, and look toward the makeshift hearth. One of the younger travelers, barely more than a boy, is crouched over the flame, coaxing heat from a small pot nestled on blackened stones. Steam curls into the cool morning air, scented with something floral and comforting. You shuffle over, blanket still draped around your shoulders like a bad toga, and sit cross-legged near the fire. The boy nods, but says nothing. He drops a few dried petals into the pot with exaggerated care, as if they're worth more than gold, which, to be fair, they kind of are. Saffron, dried stigmas of the crocus sativus flower, has been prized in Persia for millennia, used in medicine, perfume, cooking, even dye. Ancient Persian nobles used it in baths and incense, and warriors carried saffron water into battle to soothe wounds. Some even believed it warded off melancholy and fatigue. Others say it simply made bland things taste less like despair. Historians still debate its earliest trade routes. Was it domesticated in Persia and spread outward, or did it come from Crete or India before settling in as Persia's most dramatic export? Either way, you're not thinking about trade routes. You're thinking about that sweet, earthy smell curling from the pot like a whispered blessing. The boy pours you a cup. You nod your thanks and take a sip. It's slightly bitter, slightly sweet, like drinking the color gold, if that makes any sense. The caravan wakes slowly around you. Blankets rustle. Someone sneezes. The camel shifts and groans like he's got a hangover. A few people gather near the fire, accepting cups of tea in exchange for stories, jokes, or silence. You lean back against the stone wall and savor the moment. Not just the tea, but the ritual, the gathering, the shared quiet. There's something magical about it. Not grand magic, not the kind with spells or lightning, but the small, stubborn magic of people surviving together, of making heat and comfort from almost nothing, of sipping saffron tea in a ruin that probably hasn't seen a living soul in 100 years. You glance at the etched symbols near the fire pit, zigzags, suns, a bird with outstretched wings, possibly a depiction of the Fair-of-Ahar, the Zoroastrian symbol of divine protection and human purpose, or maybe just someone's doodle. Either way, it adds weight to the room. You ask the guide if this place has a name. Not anymore, he says, shrugging. Maybe once. Now it's just a stop. There's something haunting about that. You eat a small breakfast, dried figs, flatbread that's more crack than bread, and a single preserved olive that tastes like regret. But your stomach settles. You feel human again. Mostly. The guide announces you'll move slowly today. The terrain ahead is easier, but there's rumor of a shallow gorge that's been swallowing carts lately. That doesn't sound ideal. You pack your things. The camel, for once, seems ready. Maybe it's the saffron in the air. Maybe he knows you're headed somewhere safe. Or maybe he just likes the boy who fed him a handful of dried lentils earlier. You step out into morning light. The sun is low, the desert painted in pastel hues. The wind is quiet. You follow the others as they file out of the shelter and back into open land, trailing footprints that will vanish by noon. As you walk, the conversation turns to stories. Someone asks about the storm, what it looked like, felt like. You describe the wall of dust, the way the wind sounded like 1,000 people whispering different languages, the part where you thought you might vanish entirely. Another traveler, an older woman with a voice like cracked leather, chimes in. Once saw a storm strip paint from a horse cart, she says. Stripped the nails right out too. The others wince, the boy with the tea grins. I heard a sandstorm once uncovered a whole city, just swept the top layer away, like dust on a shelf. Didn't happen, the guide mutters. Could've, the boy insists. And here's the thing, it could have. Persia is full of buried cities, lost towns, submerged temples, some unearthed by wind, others by accident. A farmer digs a well and finds a stairway. A child kicks a rock and finds a carved head. Sometimes, the desert gives back. Historians still argue whether these cities fell to war, drought, or simply got swallowed by the ever-hungry land. But the stories remain, and stories in places like this are a kind of survival too. You crest a small hill and pause. Below lies a shallow gorge. The land dips gently, then sharply, like a scar across the earth. At its bottom, tracks, deep ruts from carts. Some end abruptly, wheel marks vanishing mid-roll. You feel a chill despite the warming air. The guide signals a slow descent. You walk single file, boots slipping slightly on loose rock. The camel follows, suspicious as always. Halfway down, you spot something odd, a broken wheel, half buried, scorched. What happened here? You ask. Flood, someone replies, or something worse. You frown. Worse than a flood? The guide doesn't answer. The bottom of the gorge is strangely cool, shadows lingering in its folds. You walk faster. At the other end, the group regathers. No one speaks for a while. Then someone laughs, just once, and the moment breaks. You climb back into sunlight, grateful. The land flattens again. The air smells like dust and old stone. Your teacup swings empty at your belt, and somehow the memory of saffron still lingers. You've been walking for hours, The sun is creeping higher now, heat radiating off the sand in waves you can almost see. Like the desert itself is breathing. The land has changed again. Fewer rocks, more shrubs, more deceptive dips and folds that promise shelter, but deliver only disappointment. The camel walks with robotic indifference, occasionally stopping to sniff something only he understands. You've learned to let him. He's usually right about what not to step in. Then, a soft clatter beneath your foot. You pause, shift your sandal. Something small and brittle crunches. You crouch. A shell. Tiny, pale, and cracked down the middle. A beetle's maybe, or the dry carapace of something with too many legs. You look around, suddenly aware. This isn't empty land. This is the kind of place that moves after dark. The others seem to feel it too. The pace slows. Conversations quiet. The wind, now only a whisper, brushes your back like a reminder. You're not the only thing out here. Someone mutters a prayer under their breath, Zoroastrian from the cadence, an appeal to Ahura Mazda for protection, or perhaps just a whispered hope not to step on anything venomous. As the caravan rounds a low dune, the leader holds up a hand. Everyone stops. You follow her gaze downward. At the base of the slope, spread across a shallow dip in the sand, is a carpet of movement. Scorpions, dozens, maybe more, scuttling slowly, their legs stirring sand like raindrops on dry parchment. Brown ones, pale ones, one the size of your hand. You suddenly feel very, very awake. Night left them, the guide mutters. They'll be gone by noon. But that's hours away. You all scan the area. A detour's possible, but not pretty. More sand, more heat, and a suspiciously dark patch of earth that could mean a sinkhole or worse. Someone suggests we wait. Someone else suggests fire. The leader grunts. Fire will bring jackals. Ah, good. Another problem. You hadn't thought about jackals. You had hoped, quietly, that the desert was too empty for predators. But no. Jackals. Lean, cunning, sometimes brave enough to stalk a sleeping human. Not wolves, but not dogs either. Ancient Persians had mixed views about them. In some regions they were messengers of death. In others, clever scavengers, almost respected. There's even a half-forgotten myth about a desert spirit who took the form of a jackal and led lost children home, or ate them. Historians still argue which version came first. The scorpions aren't moving away fast enough, and your boots suddenly feel far too thin. The group waits. Slowly, the creatures begin to thin out, melting into the sand or slipping under rocks. Your eyes play tricks. Every pebble looks like a claw. Every breeze sounds like a hiss. After nearly an hour, the leader gives the signal. You move forward, carefully. You follow in the exact footprints of the person ahead of you, eyes locked on the ground. No one speaks. The camel hums nervously, but doesn't panic. You whisper nonsense to him, calm, ridiculous things about tea and grass and clouds. He seems to appreciate it. Then, the shadow passes overhead. You freeze. Everyone does. A hawk. Large, pale-feathered, silent. It glides above you once, then wheels away toward the cliffs. Relief trickles down your spine. But you keep walking faster now, just in case. You clear the scorpion patch. The sand ahead is smoother, safer. The group relaxes, just slightly. You hear someone release a breath so deeply it sounds like they're deflating. Then someone steps on a dry stick. It snaps with the force of a thunderclap, and from behind a rock a jackal darts out, startled more than aggressive but still fast, still too close. It stops, looks at you, and grins. Not really, but it feels like it. You don't move, neither does it. A full 10 seconds pass. Then, it turns and trots away, its bushy tail flicking like punctuation. The group laughs, nervously. The tension breaks. You walk on. By midday, the heat is blinding. The ground seems to shimmer, your boots heavy with invisible bricks. You all spread out slightly, giving each other space to breathe. Then, up ahead, trees. Tiny, gnarled, barely alive, but real. Tamarisks. Their branches flicker silver in the wind, their roots sinking deep to find moisture no one else can. You gather beneath them, grateful for even this scrappy patch of shade. Someone sets a kettle on a hot stone. No fire needed. The sun will do the job. You sit beside the camel and pull out a pouch of dates. Chewy, sweet, packed with energy. One of the others hands you a small cone of salt. Dark, flaky, almost black. You raise an eyebrow. Desert salt, they say. Lick it, keeps your mind clear. You try it. It's terrible, but somehow grounding. The guide sits beside you and points to the tamarisks. Scorpions sleep under those, he says. Always check before sitting. You look down, slowly scoot an inch to the left. Someone chuckles, and in that moment, surrounded by sun, dust, and the soft crackling of desert life, you feel something unexpected. Not fear, not exhaustion, belonging. You're adapting. You know how to spot bad sand. You know how to follow a camel's lead. You've learned how to wrap your scarf to keep the sun out and your thoughts in. You've seen storms, scorpions, jackals, and your own limits. And you're still here. The trees thin behind you as you return to the open plain, and for a while, the wind is your only company. Software patient, persistent. It nudges at your scarf, swirls tiny whirlwinds at your feet, and occasionally tries to sneak a handful of grit into your mouth when you yawn. Charming. You're not sure how long you've been walking now. Hours blur together. Time is measured in water sips, boot blisters, and the way your shadow shortens, then lengthens again. The caravan has stretched out a little, some ahead, some trailing behind, but you remain near the middle, quietly observing the rhythm of this strange journey. And then, just beyond a low ridge, something catches your eye. Stone. Not just a few rocks, not the accidental ruins you've grown used to, but rows, carved, stacked, crumbling walls, half swallowed by dunes, laid out in a pattern that once meant structure, maybe even civilization. You veer toward it instinctively, your curiosity steering before your feet can catch up. The guide follows, squinting at the shape. Old post, he says. Trading outpost. Long dead. How long? Generations. Maybe more. You approach slowly, stepping over half-buried thresholds, brushing past doorways without doors. The wind eddies here strangely, like it remembers voices. You pass what must have once been a courtyard, its flagstones broken but still hinting at geometry, and find yourself beneath an arch that refuses to fall. It's quiet, unnervingly so. No birds, no scurrying creatures, just the wind and your own boots. The others arrive behind you, their own curiosity piqued. The leader examines a stone basin. Another traveler traces finger-worn symbols on a lintel. Someone kicks a half-buried pot, then apologizes. You wander alone toward what looks like the center, maybe once a square, a marketplace. The sand is smoother here, almost polished. You crouch and brush it away with your hands, a mosaic, faded, chipped, but visible. A lion, or maybe a dog, something powerful and four-legged, locked in eternal battle with a serpent. Classic symbolism, power versus chaos, civilization versus wildness, order versus the desert. You smile. The desert seems to be winning lately. Historians still argue about sites like this. Were they full towns or just way stations? Did they thrive briefly during the Achaemenid Empire, or were they built by independent traders trying to escape taxation? Some maps show dozens of such places, little blips between cities that were never meant to last forever. But standing here, it feels suspended. The wind picks up. A door slams. You freeze. The sound echoes across the ruins. Not a hallucination. Not your imagination. You walk toward it, slow and cautious, around a corner, past an old well choked with stones, into a narrow alley between two crumbling walls. Nothing but the door. There it is, hanging by one hinge, old wood bleached gray, still swinging slightly from the wind's nudge. You touch it, warm, real. And beyond it, another room. You step inside. Dust, rubble, but something else too. On the far wall, a mural, barely there. The pigment faded, cracked, stolen by time, but enough remains to see a figure in a golden robe, hands outstretched to the sky, surrounded by stylized clouds and tiny flames. Ahura Mazda, probably, or a priest invoking him. You step closer, studying the art. Someone painted this with intention, patience, belief. And now, centuries later, you stand before it, covered in sand and camel hair, breathing its same dry air. The guide steps in behind you. This place was holy once, he says. To whom? He shrugs. Everyone. No one. The ones who needed it. You nod. You get it. Sometimes you don't need a name, just a place to kneel and whisper into the void. You leave a pebble on the threshold as you exit, a habit you picked up somewhere, meant to say I passed through without disturbing the dead. Outside, the others have settled near the courtyard, laying out mats and starting a small fire. It's not quite night, but dusk is approaching. You're ahead of schedule. A little pause is welcome. You join them, dropping your pack with a groan. Someone passes you a chunk of salted goat cheese wrapped in date leaf. Another hands over a dented tin cup with something hot and spicy. Lentil stew, thick and clinging to the spoon like it's afraid to be alone. You eat, you listen. Stories bubble up again. One man claims he once rode through a lightning storm on a salt flat and came out glowing. Another swears a sandstorm once unearthed a mosaic floor so beautiful that he spent 3 days brushing it clean by hand, only for the next storm to cover it again. A woman describes a caravan that vanished, leaving only their shadows baked into the stone. You chuckle, then pause. Really? No, she says, smiling. But it's a good story. It is. The sky fades to indigo. A few stars blink on. Someone starts singing, a low, rhythmic tune without words, just a melody that fits the desert. And you realize something. These ruins aren't empty. They're full of ghosts. Not the scary kind. The other kind. The people who once cooked here, slept here, whispered here. They're still around. In the worn stones. In the paint that refuses to vanish. In the air. You lie back against a slab of stone that was probably a bench before it cracked in half. The camel groans somewhere behind you, settling in. The fire crackles. The stars arrive one by one, quiet and bright, and in the soft hum of dusk, surrounded by strangers who are slowly becoming something else, you feel calm. Like maybe this sandstorm journey, terrifying, itchy, bewildering, isn't just survival. Maybe it's transformation. You wake with stone lines pressed into your back and a beetle trying to climb up your sleeve. The ruins are still. The fires burn down to glowing coals. The others stir slowly. Blankets rustle. Someone coughs. The camel lets out a sigh that could win awards for sheer melodrama. Above, the sky is soft gray. Dawn, but just barely. The light reveals the ruins in fuller detail now, Stone passageways leading nowhere, doorways to sand-filled rooms, and fragments of pottery scattered like breadcrumbs from time travelers. You stretch, wipe the dust from your face, and rise. Today, the goal is Persepolis, or what remains of it. It's far still, a few days at best, but for the first time since this journey began, you sense a destination forming in your bones. Not just a direction, a pull. The guide confirms it as you pack. Road forks up ahead, he says. One way leads toward Persepolis, the other to the salt flats. Let's not get clever. You agree. You all set out just after sunrise, boots scuffing dry earth, shadows long and uncertain. As you crest a low rise, the land shifts again. The sand flattens, the hills widen, and something strange becomes apparent. You're walking along a road, not a path, not a track, a road, half buried by time and dust, but still visible beneath your feet. Stones, laid in lines, a pattern, a plan. You pause, stare down, kneel. Here, just beneath a crust of wind-blown debris, is the unmistakable mark of empire. Ancient roads like these once stretched for hundreds of miles, connecting the Achaemenid capital to distant cities and far-flung satrapies. Couriers ran them. Armies marched them. Kings paraded along them with gold, banners, and elephants, probably not thrilled about the heat. This one is quiet now. The only banners are the shifting light between clouds. But still, you feel something stir in your chest. You're walking where kings once rode. And maybe, just maybe, some of their thoughts echo in the stones beneath your feet. You follow the old road. It leads you between two rising hills, and then something strange happens. The wind stills. The silence thickens. The air feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. And then you see them. Carvings, low reliefs etched into the hillsides, faint, eroded, but visible in the angled morning light. Warriors, lions, dignitaries with curled beards and robes stiff with symbolic meaning, columns with lotus flower capitals, traces of paint, yes, paint, red ochre, maybe blue, almost gone but not quite. The guide lowers his voice. This was a gate once, he says, a marker for those entering the king's domain. You run your fingers over one figure's face, smooth from centuries of sun and sand, but still proud, still watching, and you get it now. This was no random journey. This route, this path, this suffering through storms and scorched feet, it's the old road. The royal road. The same one Herodotus praised, claiming nothing moved faster than a Persian courier on this highway. Historians still argue whether he exaggerated or simply envied their mail system. You grin. You? You're the slowest courier in history. But you're here. The others walk past in respectful quiet. No jokes, no grumbling. Even the camel seems to lower his head slightly as you pass beneath what might have once been a ceremonial arch. The air shifts, warm, dry, but electric, like something just noticed you. You walk on. By midday, the landscape has changed again. More stones, fewer dunes. Scrub grass pokes through the ground. The heat is harsh but not blinding. A breeze returns. You pass what looks like an old satrap's checkpoint. Just a few cracked walls and a platform that might have once held guards. Someone has scratched modern names into the stone. You try not to be annoyed. It's history tagging over history. A weird sort of continuity. You sit near the checkpoint and eat a simple lunch. Pistachios, a bit of dry bread, a sliver of something that tastes vaguely like cheese but might be soap. You drink slowly, aware that your water supply is just barely acceptable. You're saving the good water skin for when the going gets worse. The guide joins you, chewing thoughtfully. This road, he says, it runs deeper than stone. You raise an eyebrow. It's memory, he says. The land remembers. Walk long enough, and you become part of it. You finish chewing your pistachio. I was hoping for just a nice view. He chuckles. Later you pass more ruins, walls with buttresses, an old granary, a line of pillars like broken teeth. No roof, just sun. You touch each one as you walk by, counting silently. The desert gives up its ghosts reluctantly. But today, it seems generous. You descend into a shallow valley lined with tamarisk trees and small springs, actual water, clear and trickling. Everyone takes turns refilling their skins. You even pour some into your hands and splash your face. Cold. Life. Your camel snorts in approval and dunks his snout into the pool. You sit in the shade and close your eyes. You imagine the road full again. Merchants, soldiers, priests, children, elephants in silk, musicians, dancers, ambassadors from places whose names are lost to time. You picture satraps riding in on gilded wagons, scrolls tucked under their arms, sandals dusted with miles. You are, just for a moment, one of them. Then your back cracks again, and the illusion is gone. You rise, groaning, but smiling. One more mile behind you. One step closer to the old capital. And this strange, surreal sense that the past is watching you walk, maybe approving, maybe amused, carries you forward. The sun is leaning toward late afternoon now, stretching shadows across the stones like long, lazy arms. You've been walking the road for hours, and every step feels etched into the soles of your feet. You've worn your sandals into new shapes. Your scarf smells like campfire and sweat. Even your thoughts feel sun-bleached. And then, like a surprise party no one warned you about, you hear a noise that's neither wind, nor camel, nor footsteps. It's rushing water. You stop. At first, you think your ears are playing tricks. You've imagined plenty of things on this trip. Shade that wasn't shade, trees that turned out to be rocks, mirages of pots full of honey that turned out to be dry camel droppings. But no, this time it's real. The guide stops too, listens, nods. Flood season, he says. You blink. Flood? Out here? He points ahead. Seasonal runoff, mountain meltwater channeled down old riverbeds. Good news is, it means the qanats are still flowing. Bad news is, we're walking into it. You crest a gentle rise, and suddenly, you see it. A dry riverbed that is no longer dry. A shallow surge of water, maybe knee-high, cutting across the old road like a liquid snake. It's fast, it's loud, and it wasn't on the schedule. The others catch up. The leader clicks her tongue, clearly annoyed. We wait or we go around. You all peer into the distance. Going around would take hours, possibly overnight. And it's hard to say whether the detour would be safer. You stare at the water. It's not deep, but it's fast, and the riverbed itself is deceptive. What looks like firm gravel might be slick mud, or worse, quicksand. Your camel sniffs it, then takes 2 very decisive steps backward. He is not on board. You consider your options. Then someone in the group, a man from the eastern provinces with a headscarf wound like a turban, grins and pulls off his sandals. What? You all afraid of a little bath? Before anyone can protest, he steps in and promptly falls over. You all wince as he surfaces, sputtering and flailing, soaked and looking deeply betrayed. Slippery, he mutters. No kidding. Still, he crawls out grinning, shaking water from his hair. It's cool though, he says, and not cursed. So there's that. Encouraging. Eventually, after much debate, the decision is made. The pack animals will be led across first, carefully. Then the gear. Then, if all goes well, the humans. You watch nervously as the first camel enters the water, led by two handlers. It stumbles, snorts, but finds footing. Then another follows. Then yours. You walk beside him, holding the reins tightly. The water hits your calves. Cold, shocking, invigorating in the worst way. The current tugs at your legs. You slide slightly, regain balance, and press forward. Each step is a challenge. Every rock feels like it's coated in invisible oil. But you make it. The camel makes it. The gear doesn't float away. A success. Once everyone's across, dripping but upright, there's a moment of shared celebration. Someone makes a joke about Persians inventing water parks. Another shakes his fist at the sky. The leader just mutters, "We'll dry by nightfall." She's right. The sun, ever loyal in its desert cruelty, begins baking everyone dry within minutes. You continue on. But something has shifted. You're thinking differently now. That flash flood wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a reminder. This land is clever, tricky, beautiful, yes, but never passive. Ancient Persia understood this well. The people who built this empire didn't just survive the desert. They outwitted it. You recall stories of how engineers carved channels through stone, digging underground to avoid evaporation. Some qanats stretched for kilometers beneath mountains, sloping so gradually that the water flowed smoothly, silently, unseen. Even today, archaeologists marvel at their precision. They debate how such technology emerged so early, with such sophistication. Was it invented here, or borrowed and perfected? No one agrees. But the genius remains undeniable. And here you are, on the surface, slipping over mud and nearly face-planting in a creek. Ancient Persia. 1. You. 0. Still, you walk. As the road continues, you pass what appears to be the remnants of an aqueduct, tall, broken arches rising from the sand like fingers grasping at the sky. The stone is worn, but the lines are clean, deliberate. You imagine water once flowed high above, carried across vast distances to cities now lost. You imagine a world where the desert wasn't an obstacle but a challenge worth solving. You find yourself smiling again. Later, you stop to rest in the shade of a strange rock formation. Flat, stacked layers that look like someone's attempt to build a stone wedding cake. You eat quietly. Drink. Listen. In the distance, thunder rolls. Not from the sky, but deep beneath the earth. A subtle tremor. The leftover voice of water moving through old veins. Still flowing, the guide says. You ask him if the qanats still reach Persepolis. He nods. Some, not all, but enough. He tells you about a village that still drinks from a channel dug by hands long dead. They say the water tastes sweeter there, he says, because it remembers how far it traveled. Poetic. Probably not true, but who cares? You sit for a while longer, watching dust motes dance in a shaft of golden light. The group begins to stir. The road still calls. You rise. The mud on your legs has dried to a pale crust. The camel seems strangely smug. You follow the ancient road once more, feet squelching, soul steadier. Because today, you didn't just survive the desert. You crossed a flood the kings once feared, and you kept walking. Evening arrives without fanfare, just a gradual dimming, the sun dipping behind a ridge with all the ceremony of someone quietly closing a heavy curtain. The light goes golden, then bronze, then blue-gray. The heat lifts, the wind returns, not fierce, just persistent, like a sleepy dog nosing your side for attention. You crest a slope and see the camp forming below, a crescent of blankets, camels arranged like lumpy chess pieces, a flicker of flame already coaxed into being. There's comfort in the routine now. Drop your pack, unstrap the gear, give the camel a pat, a grunt, a scratch between the ears if he's earned it. He hasn't. But you do it anyway. Tonight feels quieter than the rest. You settle near the fire with a bowl of something thick and beige, somewhere between porridge and paste. Grain-based, possibly barley, possibly sand, but warm and slightly sweet. Someone's tossed in a few raisins. Luxury. Across the circle, one of the older travelers begins telling a story. It's not announced. No one says, "Gather round." It just happens. Her voice is steady, cracked at the edges like an old clay bowl. She speaks of a time when kings sat beneath trees, not thrones, when horses drank from marble fountains, when couriers ran faster than falcons, bearing messages not just between cities, but between gods. She speaks of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, the eternal flame, the force behind all that is good and ordered, of how he watches over those who act with righteousness, and how those who lie or cheat find their paths swallowed by sand. You stir your porridge absently. There's something calming in it. Not the theology, necessarily, but the rhythm, the knowing that once, even here in the middle of nowhere, people told stories to push back the dark. When she finishes, no one claps. No one needs to. The silence afterward is the applause. Someone adds wood to the fire. You glance up at the stars. They're fully awake now. Dozens, no, hundreds, of pinpricks scattered across the ink-black dome. The kind of sky you can only see when you're far from cities, far from anything. You spot Orion, then Taurus, then a cluster you can't name but feel drawn to anyway. The guide catches your eye. "Want to hear a better story?" he asks. You nod. He leans in, voice low. "There's an old tale," he says, "about a man who wandered the desert looking for truth. He asked priests, kings, animals, even the wind. No one gave him an answer. But when he fell asleep in a ruined city, starving, cold, the sand shifted, and beneath him, carved into the floor, was one word. You wait. What was it?" The guide shrugs. No one remembers, probably something simple. But it changed him. You stare at him. You're the worst kind of storyteller. He grins. "I like a little mystery." You lie back and let the sounds of the camp settle around you. Gentle conversation, the snap of twigs, the soft scrape of bowls. Somewhere, someone starts humming. Not a melody, you know. Maybe it's improvised, or ancient, or both. You close your eyes, and then a foot nudges your side. "Don't sleep yet," the guide says. "You're on watch." You groan, sit up, grab a stick, and find a good spot near the camels. Your shift is quiet. The stars stay put. The wind hums a lullaby you can't quite follow. The camel farts once. You forgive him. Midway through your watch, you hear movement. Not alarming. Just nearby. You turn, and in the distance, on a rise not far from camp, you see a figure, sitting, alone. You walk closer, cautious but curious. It's the woman from earlier, the storyteller. She's sitting on a flat rock, facing the dark. "Couldn't sleep?" you ask. She shakes her head. "Just listening." "To what?" She smiles. "The ground, the past. It has a hum." You sit beside her. She continues. "I once heard that every grain of sand remembers being a mountain, that it whispers about it when no one's listening." You nod. "That's either beautiful or deeply unsettling." "Both," she says, and together, you sit in silence. Below you, the camp rests. Around you, the desert breathes. Above, the stars burn with patient indifference. And somewhere, beneath your feet, the stones whisper of satraps and soldiers, of kings and grain porridge, of messengers who ran without rest, and dancers who spun until the dust rose in delight, and of you, the one who came later, the one who listened. You return to camp just before your watch ends. You sleep deeply, without dreams. The ground, it seems, has told enough stories for one night. You rise with the dawn, slowly, reluctantly, like bread that forgot to rise overnight. Everything aches. Your shoulders, your calves, your eyelids. Even your shadow looks tired. The camp is already stirring. Blankets being rolled, camel gear clinking softly in the pre-sunlight gloom. The air smells like morning fire, charcoal and bitter herbs. Someone has brewed something resembling coffee, though you suspect it's mostly hot water with ambition. You accept a cup. It's terrible. You drink it anyway. Today is the last push before Persepolis. You hear the word whispered among the travelers, sometimes with reverence, sometimes with weariness, always with a hint of disbelief. Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, the city of pillars and stone staircases and carved processions frozen mid-step for thousands of years. The city that Alexander the Great supposedly wept over, then burned. You're still not sure why you're walking toward it. Maybe because everyone else is. Maybe because, after all this, you have to. The leader gathers the group with a grunt. Storm might return tonight. We keep a hard pace. If your camel doesn't like it, carry him. You don't think she's joking. The first miles pass in silence. Everyone is conserving energy. The landscape is harsher now, less sand, more rock. The road narrows, cuts through ravines and dry gullies. Dust devils spin lazily in the distance, like dancers practicing alone. The sky stays calm, but you can feel something building. That subtle pressure, that pause in the wind before a punch. The guide walks beside you, unusually quiet. You glance over. Everything all right? He nods. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. He grins, then points to the horizon. See that line of hills? You squint. Barely. That's where the river splits. Once we're past it, we'll see the terraces. Terraces? He nods. The foundation of the palace. Wide steps, broad platforms. You'll know when you see it. You don't know what to expect, really. All your life, ruins have meant crumbled walls, half-buried staircases, things that suggest stories rather than tell them outright. But Persepolis? That's different. That's where stories began. As you walk, the air thickens. The sky stays clear, but the light feels strange. Too bright, too white. Even the rocks seem to sweat. Around midday, the group stops briefly near a rock face carved with more reliefs. Kings, gods, lions again. One traveler touches the stone gently and whispers something that sounds like an apology. The guide looks up at the carvings and says, "People don't remember the builders. Only the battles." He's not wrong. You keep moving. One foot, then the other. The heat presses down now, more insistent. The wind picks up, shifting, circling, carrying the kind of silence that comes right before something loud. Then, drums. Not real ones. But your heart hears them, because suddenly, the hills part. And there it is. Persepolis, or what's left. You stop walking. So does everyone else. Ahead of you, wide terraces rising from the desert floor, each layer stacked like an offering. Pillars reach toward the sky. Broken, yes, but still upright, still defiant. Staircases carved with hundreds of figures, each one different, frozen in procession. Bulls, soldiers, delegates with gifts, beards curled with impossible precision. The city isn't gone. It's waiting. You walk forward. Each step feels like entering a dream. No guards, no gates, just time itself opening the door. You climb the steps slowly, hand brushing the rail, once smooth, now pitted with age. Each stair feels ceremonial, like you should be carrying something sacred. At the top, the wind hits you. Not hard, but full of presence. It moves your scarf. It moves your heart. The guide stands beside you, says nothing. He doesn't have to. Below, the plains stretch endlessly. Above, the pillars frame the sky. And around you, the remnants of something vast. This was more than a palace. This was a statement. Here stood the heart of an empire so confident it carved its pride into stone and dared time to forget. You sit on a fallen block, trying to make sense of it all. The fire pits, the storage rooms, the audience halls where kings greeted dignitaries from Egypt, Greece, India, the ceilings once painted with lapis blue and gold leaf, the cedar beams shipped from distant forests, the footsteps of queens, the whispers of spies. Historians still argue about how much of Persepolis was used and how much was meant to impress. Was it truly functional, or mostly a theatrical backdrop for imperial splendor? No one agrees. But what remains, what survives, says enough. You rest your palm on the warm stone. It hums just slightly. Or maybe that's your pulse. The others explore, voices hushed. Some sketch, some sitting. One begins to cry. You don't blame them. You wander through a colonnade. The columns rise like fluted trees, their capitals shaped into bulls and griffins. You walk between them and feel impossibly small, like a child in a cathedral, like an ant in a jewelry box, and yet also, oddly, welcome. Because this place, despite its grandeur, invites you to look, to wonder, to remember. The guide finds you again, hands you a fig. You eat in silence. The fig is sweet, software, and tastes like every mile you walked to get here. You look out over the steps, the stone, the shadows beginning to grow long. You made it. And somehow, everything you carried with you, the heat, the storm, the hunger, the terrible camel jokes, all of it has led you to this moment. And you're not just looking at Persepolis now. You're part of it. You sit until the sun begins to fall behind the columns, and you let it all in. The light is leaving fast now. You watch it drain from the sky like tea from a cracked cup, gold bleeding into mauve, then into a soft, inky blue. The stone of Persepolis glows for a final moment, then cools into shadow. What was majestic by daylight becomes mysterious at dusk. The camp is being set up just beyond the edge of the terraces, near a line of shallow hills. People move slowly now, with the reverence of those who know they've arrived somewhere sacred, even if they still have no idea how. You remain on the steps for a little while longer. The marble is smooth beneath you, warm still from the day's sun. You run your fingers along a shallow groove, one made by centuries of boots, sandals, maybe even bare feet. The groove curves like a question. Maybe 1,000 people asked it before you did. Maybe none of them got an answer either. Eventually, you rise and walk back to the others. The fire has been built carefully, flat stones in a circle, a low flame fed with scrub and camel dung. The air smells faintly of smoke, mint, and something being toasted just slightly too long. You take your seat. No one speaks for a while. Then someone says, "I thought it would be bigger." Laughter ripples through the group. Not loud, just warm. It breaks the spell a little, reminds everyone they're still human, still hungry, still sore. You unwrap your last bundle of food, bread, a bit of spiced lentil mash, and the smallest square of honeycomb. It sticks to your fingers and melts on your tongue. It tastes like celebration. The guide clears his throat. Everyone looks up. "Tonight," he says, "we rest here. We eat. We honor the road." A few heads nod. "Tomorrow," he adds, "we go home. Or onward. Or wherever your feet want to go next." You blink. The thought hadn't occurred to you. You'd been so focused on getting here, that you hadn't considered what happens after. Do you retrace your steps? Find another caravan? Stay? Persepolis doesn't offer answers. It only stands. You lean back, looking up at the sky again. The stars are everywhere now, crowded, bright, impossibly sharp. They frame the ruined columns, casting thin shadows that stretch and sway like memories. One of the travelers, a man who barely spoke the entire journey, pulls out a reed flute. He plays quietly. The notes drift like smoke, sometimes confident, sometimes hesitant, always beautiful. The music fills the gaps between everyone's thoughts, and something in you softens. You think back to that first moment, the wall of sand, the panic, the awful scarf tied too tight across your face. You think about the caravan, the ruined shelter, the tea, the scorpions, the laughter, the pain, the quiet. It feels like years ago. You've changed. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way. You haven't found treasure. You didn't fight monsters. You didn't unlock a secret scroll beneath the palace ruins, though that would have been cool. But still, there's something different in the way your body feels beneath the stars, the way your mind lingers in silence without needing to fill it, the way your hands know how to tighten the camel's harness without being told. You've been shaped by this journey, carved slowly, like those pillars you passed earlier. A small voice in your head, maybe your own, whispers, "You're not surviving the desert anymore. You're living in it." You sit beside the guide as the flute fades away. He hands you a bowl. "Warm milk," he says. "Goat, probably." You drink it. It's awful. You smile anyway. Someone starts humming again. Someone else begins telling a joke that takes 4 minutes to reach the punchline. The fire crackles. The stars pulse. And you feel it, suddenly and absolutely. You'll never forget this. Not the sand. Not the storm. Not the silence. Not the city. Not the people. Strangers who somehow became familiar just by walking beside you through wind and time. You stay by the fire a little longer. Then you lay back, using your rolled scarf as a pillow. You stare at the sky until your eyes blur, until your breath slows, until your body becomes just another shape on the desert floor. And as sleep creeps in, soft and certain, you think, "I came through the sandstorm, and I kept going, and I found something I didn't know I'd lost. Not a place, not a treasure, just myself. And now you lie there still. The fire has faded to quiet embers, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the ash. Around you, the camp has gone silent. No laughter, no footsteps. Only the slow shifting of sleeping bodies and the occasional sigh of a camel, dreaming desert dreams. The stars hang above you, silent sentinels, their light cool and steady. You trace the lines between them lazily, no longer trying to name them, just letting them be, letting everything be. The breeze brushes your face, not cold, just soft, like a hand smoothing your brow, easing your thoughts into gentler shapes. You feel the weight of your body settle into the earth. The ache in your muscles is distant now. Your breath slows, your thoughts soften. Even the memories blur at the edges, not fading, just quieting. Somewhere out there, the wind still moves across the dunes. But here, in this small circle of warmth and stone and story, there is only peace, the kind you didn't find at the end of the journey, but somewhere along the way, when your feet stopped resisting the sand, and your heart started listening to the silence. So breathe. Let your chest rise and fall like the rhythm of the road you walked. Let your eyes close gently. You're safe. You're home. You're exactly where you need to be. Sweet dreams.